You're basically a Neanderthal. And I know that sounds crazy, but everything that you do in life ties back to Neanderthals. Not exactly. 10,000 years ago, or even 100,000 years ago, we were cavemen. We were just like any other animal, running around in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of nature, trying to survive, hunt, and find somebody to mate with. Everything that you do in your life right now ties back exactly to that caveman or Neanderthal or whatever we were hundreds of thousands of years ago. The same instincts, the same emotions, and the same day-to-day life experiences can all be explained by that. The way that you feel grief over breaking up with somebody, the way that you feel joy whenever you achieve something, the way that you feel scared whenever you walk in the dark, or just the most unexplainable things. Why am I afraid to speak to my crush? Why do I enjoy burgers so much and fries and chips and candy and I don't like salad? I know this video sounds pointless, but this is one of the things that I think helped me the very most with understanding myself and what I feel and who I am as a person. A couple of years ago, I remember I noticed how scared I was to be in a relationship with somebody. I'm pretty bad at it, and I know now that's because of a genetic disorder I have, which directly affects my relationships. But for a very long time, I was really confused. Why do I get so anxious in relationships? I get into a relationship with a girl, it goes well for the first couple of weeks, and then I start noticing all the small things. How she isn't replying quick enough, how she's kind of giving me less attention than she was in the start, the texts are drier, she initiates less stuff, and then I get nervous and anxious, and then I do a bunch of stuff, I overreact basically, and I put so much pressure on the other person that eventually it falls apart. I know it's not all my fault, and I won't put all the blame on myself because I think that's kind of self-belittling, but why? Why was I scared to speak to a stranger in public when I wanted to ask them for directions for a bus? Why is it that I prefer eating burgers so much more and fries and chips and whatever candy than eating healthy food? Why do I struggle so much with sticking and actually doing the stuff that I want to do instead of the stuff that my body really pushes me to do? It's almost like there's some underlying force that keeps on making me feel certain stuff and makes me do stuff that I don't really know where it comes from. And I know this is such a generic topic, and I know you're sitting here thinking, you probably have something in mind, right? Something unexplainable in your life that just doesn't make sense because it happens, but you can't explain where it comes from. It just does. It's because of the Neanderthal inside of you, or whatever, Homo sapiens. I don't fucking know, bro. I'm not into all the science stuff. And I don't know why I made this video in the first place, but it's just such an important thing, because the moment I realized that everything ties back to then, that's when it started making sense. So I started looking into, why do I feel so anxious in relationships? That was the one thing that I initially was like, why the hell does this come from? I had a good upbringing, right? I had good parents, good loving. I didn't have anything in my life that would make me, anxious in relationships. And that's obviously apart from my genetic disorder, right? But why? So I started looking into the biology of humans, whatever. I started watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and it suddenly started making sense. Imagine you're a caveman and you stood on a field 10,000 years ago, and you've been walking all day, right? And you have your spear in one hand, and you don't have any clothes on, whatever. You're just a caveman, ooga booga, and you see a woman, just a female Neanderthal, whatever, Homo sapien, across the field. And she looks at you and you look at her. And you see her. Your heart is racing, right? Because if you hadn't seen a woman in months, and this was the first Homo sapien you saw, because back then there weren't that many. So you see her and you're like, oh my God, I need to reproduce. And I know that sounds kind of direct and harsh, but the reason why we exist is to reproduce, right? Obviously there's other stuff in your life, but that's the main mission as a human. So you see her and you're thinking, oh my God, if I don't go talk to her, I won't see another female in a very long time. So there's this huge pressure And let's say you go speak to her and you fail. First of all, you're gonna look ridiculous in front of your tribe back home, right? Because, you know, imagine the tribe was there as well, and they saw you fuck up, right? Then you're seen as weak. You might get thrown out. But even more importantly than that, if you fail to reproduce with this human, with this female, you failed at doing the most important task as a human, which is to create babies and, you know, continue the cycle of life. That's just biology. So there's this huge pressure for you to pick her up, right? So you pick her up, and eventually, you know, you're dating, whatever. You're in like 100,000 years ago, caveman, whatever, dating this other caveman woman 100,000 years ago. Now imagine you guys haven't had babies yet, right? You haven't reproduced, and all of a sudden she's kind of staying away a little bit longer from home, and she's, you know, she's not really giving you as much warmth and whatever. If you're a caveman back then, your brain would jump to, did she just find another caveman to reproduce with? And you would be panicking, because if she has, she might just disappear one day. When you come back to your cave, she might not even be there anymore. And all of a sudden, you can't carry on the most important task as a human, which is to reproduce. We still have the same brains, the same nervous system. We're almost biologically the exact same as we were 100,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago, whatever. You get the point. We're pretty fucking similar. That's why. And you know, it goes further than just being anxious in a relationship. It could be something as specific as, why do I prefer candy, right? Why? Oh, because it's got fat and sugar. Fat and sugar are the two most important things for human survival. And in nature, almost no combination of food exists where there's high fat and high sugar. It's either one or the other, and then usually very little amounts of each, unless it's obviously like meat. There's a lot of fat in meat, but you get the point. So when you put two of those together, your brain immediately thinks that right there is the most golden, most holy thing I've ever tasted. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, we didn't have the combination of fat and sugar together. So when you found them out in nature, your brain immediately went like, oh wow, this is very valuable because there's so little of this, and this is essential for surviving. So your brain just tells you, eat as much as you can, because there's no off switch, because there was never a need for an off switch, because for the majority of human existence, for 99% of it, there was so little of this thing that an off switch would have actually hurt you, because then your brain would have just, given up on sugar and fat, which you need to survive. Because there was no max, because it was almost physically impossible to find so much fat and sugar to reach a max. But the issue is, with today's candy and fries and whatever, all the junk food, it's very easy to go above that. So when you, those are two examples, but when you really think about it, everything that you do in life, everything, emotionally, instinct-wise, it's all related to back then. Why do you feel so depressed when you have nothing going in your life, right? Why? Yes, you feel depressed, but why do you do that? Imagine 10,000 years ago, you're a caveman, sat in your cave, and for some reason, let's say you lost both your legs, you can no longer hunt. You can no longer get food to provide for family. Now, as a man, this usually happens more for men, but also women. It's just what I've seen, where men really need something to do all the time, like a purpose, like a mission, to get a better life experience. Imagine you're crippled, you lost both your freaking legs, and you have no wife, no kids, nothing. You're a caveman 100,000 years ago, and you lost both your legs. Your purpose back then was very simple: just go out and get food, survive, take care of your wounds, and don't get eaten by some other animal. Now, because we have the same brains, your brain basically thinks the same way. When you have nothing going in your life, and you're doing nothing or pointless things that your brain doesn't think aids towards your survival, you get depressed. Because imagine back then, you couldn't get food, you couldn't hunt. First of all, you would just die, right? But you have food, even though you work a job that you think is pointless. But it goes even deeper than that. If you weren't out there to provide and do stuff that you deemed essential for your survival, you couldn't provide for a woman. Look, I don't want to delve too much into the feminine, whatever, masculine, stay-at-home wife, whatever, because I don't usually agree with it. But what I'm trying to say is, back then, the guy usually was the one who kind of had to go out and hunt because men were physically stronger, and then the woman at home just kind of had to, watch out for the babies. And I know in a lot of cultures, especially the Viking culture, both men and women were out there, but generally the men was more out there to provide, and women usually chose the man who could provide the most and keep her the most safe. You see this across almost every species in nature. The biggest and strongest man gets all the girls. Now imagine you couldn't go out there and do your purpose. Because both your legs are gone, you couldn't attract a female to reproduce with. So you see how it all links back to just being a caveman. Like, no matter what you do, it all links back to it, right? You have no purpose, whatever. That is depressing because you couldn't survive without having, going out and hunting. So you get depressed because you can't survive, and you get depressed because you couldn't find a female either. That's why purpose is so important. Having something in your life that you enjoy doing that adds meaning to it. And I know this sounds like, okay, maybe it applies to a few things. It applies to everything. Whatever emotion you're feeling is completely and 100% tied back to some action, some evolutionary point in our human history from like tens and hundreds of thousands of years ago. Anything emotional and anything with that any instinct can all be explained by our evolution, by humans back then. Both of them. Like, let's say somebody gives you a big fucking gift, right? Why do you get so happy? Number one, because back then we used to live in tribes. And I know that, okay, well, how are tribes a part of evolution? But it very much is. The ones who survived were the ones who stayed with other people. So literally tribes and collecting and being together with humans was a massive part of our survival. That's probably the reason why you're afraid of public speaking, for example. If you speak publicly, you're afraid of speaking publicly because what if you embarrass yourself and everybody else views you as weak? Back then, if people viewed you as weak and kind of dumb and whatever, and they thought you were annoying, they would kick you out of the tribe. You would die. That's why you're afraid of public speaking and embarrassing yourself and wearing certain clothes outside, whatever, that you want to wear, but you're afraid of other people's judgment. Back to the point that I was saying, when you get a big gift, the reason why you get so happy is, number one, you've just increased that bond between you and that other human being, which means that you're more likely to stick together, and back then, sticking together meant survival. Do you see where I'm getting at this, right? And getting a gift also, just like the item in itself, can be the analogy or the metaphor for an ancient spear or a piece of food or a knife that could help you survive because you could hunt with it. And I know this video just seems pointless, and I know I've said that before earlier, but I feel like understanding the why behind everything that we do brings so much of an explanation. It eliminates all the unknowns in our life, and it makes me feel like I know myself better. Like I feel more safe and comfortable with myself, knowing why I do stuff and why I feel some more, especially why do I feel certain emotions. It's reassuring. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.